Hi, welcome to the Engage2 YouTube channel. My name's Amelia Loye. I'm the Managing Director of Engage2, and today I have with me Chris Haller from Konveio. Chris, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. Great being here.
Excellent. If you haven't heard of it, Konveio is a document-based consultation and engagement solution for government. And Chris is going to tell us a little bit about why he started the company, then go into some of the features of the product and tell us a little bit about how it meets the Australian and New Zealand government security requirements. Chris, thanks for joining us. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be on the show today, and a little bit about yourself and why you started the company.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is a great opportunity to start sharing more about what we've been doing here in the United States with our clients around the world. So this is an exciting opportunity for us. Personally, I started getting into public engagement as going through school as an urban planner. Being fascinated at the time about all these new web tools. This was kind of before, Google Maps and Web 2.0. So nobody really wanted to have anything to do with it at the time. Everybody thought we were crazy. And so over the years, because there were no tools available, we started building them and started building sort of more generic kind of digital engagement tools under a different company called Urban Interactive Studio at the time. But really sort of in our work with clients, the problem that we kept bumping into is that the tools on the market, including the ones that we were building, were not handling feedback on content very well. So the point when projects started moving into alternatives or design choices or presenting reports or final plans for review, there was just nothing on the market that really seemed to solve that problem. So it was ultimately something that for multiple years kind of fascinated us, and we tried different things, and eventually, out of that grew Konveio to the point where we abandoned all the other things that we were doing and really focused purely on Konveio about a year ago. And it's been a wild ride, and I'll share some of that with you and your audience.
Fantastic. It really is one of the biggest challenges in engagement, is how do we get people to read content before they participate in the engagement? Often we're seeing hundreds of documents going out for consultation by governments, but they go out with the document over here and the survey over here. So I really like the idea of integrating both the content and the engagement, or what I like to say, content and process, the engagement process, because it does encourage a little bit more deliberation and consideration of the information prior to participating. So I'm really excited to see what you guys are doing, Chris. Should we launch into your presentation, and would you mind sharing a few things about the product at an overview level, and then maybe go into a little bit more detail about some of the ways that it's being used by governments over in America?
Perfect. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Happy to do a quick intro and then maybe look at a couple of examples. Yeah, so at Konveio, you described the problem very well. The two pitfalls, for creating buy-in, really sort of for us, that sort of content engagement is sort of creating buy-in, and the challenge we find is, one, who reads long information or complex content, and so what we often find is, like you said, we have PDFs shared, and maybe it's a chapter by chapter download of a plan, or maybe it's a PDF posted about some results, and they're usually listed. They require some downloading. It requires scrolling through a bunch of content. So that we thought there has to be a way to do this better. The other part is then, how do we manage feedback around it? Because the example or the scenario you described of having a survey that then references, well, somewhere on page 7, there's X, or somewhere in the middle of the document, there's Y that I don't agree with, requires a lot of work ultimately to kind of make sense of everything. So the question is, how can we make life easier and avoid this sort of information overload and then tracking what, people are actually referencing? And so, the solution for us was to build a content engagement solution. That's really what Konveio is. And looking at this, there's sort of, 4 main use cases that we saw sort of emerge as we started working on this. So the obvious one is the one we just talked about, which is draft review. So we have, a draft plan or some draft policies. that are ready for review. So we offer simple ways to post those and have people then post comments directly within the document, respond to each other, and some analysis and other tools to kind of make sense of it all. We have expanded that then into, because we heard more and more requests, like how can we actually publish that after the engagement is done, or even during the engagement, in a way that it makes it easier to understand. So this means bringing things like maps to the document. Instead of having a document here and then having to go to the GIS part of the city's website, why not bring the two together and kind of integrate them? The same for videos, for other kind of information or architecture kind of structures, to not have to scroll through everything, but to jump to certain pages specifically, or to reference certain pages from somewhere else on the website. So that's kind of the interactive document kind of use case. And really sort of making it fun to explore is a key piece of that. And then, now with the recent changes and not being able to meet in person anymore because of the pandemic, digital workshops really have become sort of a key component to what we're doing. It started with a lot of people that haven't really even beforehand used digital engagement as much, maybe architecture and landscape architecture firms that usually run in-person workshops with big poster boards, and sort of ask the expert kind of activities. They're coming to us and saying, how can we bring those things online? And so that's sort of a new thing that we offer, and tools that we sort of included in Konveio is really sort of having sort of a digital workshop that is not a 2-hour Zoom call, but an alternative or an extension of that. And then last but not least, it's sort of this sort of closed engagement. So the internal and external stakeholders that communities are often having to coordinate with, that they, a citizen advisory committee, a business community, that are often loose and that typically requires a lot of back and forth emailing of documents that leads to, emails getting lost, people not knowing what the most recent version is that they should be looking at, to, again, sort of duplicating content or comments. So we provided sort of a password protected space for them to make that very simple without requiring, extensive learning on their end. So those are really sort of the key things that Konveio was built for and helps with. And, getting into sort of functionality, Konveio we offer as 2 different packages. So there's the Conveyor Docs and Conveyor Sites. And at the heart of it is really the difference is ultimately the way that we present content. So we started, and so this is where we started out. Conveyor Docs is based on PDFs because it seems like that's what everybody produces. It's what everybody is familiar with. It's the lowest cost, easiest to produce kind of content. And so in that package, we just offer you a way to simply upload that and add additional information on top of that. Again, so that being maps and videos and other things, and then bringing the engagement to the document. So bringing all the users to the document instead of sending a document out and then getting tons of different documents back. Conveyor Sites is sort of the next level up. It's a little different. It's structured around landing pages. So it gives you more flexibility in terms of how you present something, in terms of summaries, in terms of guiding users. There's something that we find very important is sort of this self-guided experience, instead of scrolling and having to follow the linear process, sort of like similar as a survey where you have to follow through similarly. This gives us choices in terms of guiding users to exactly what they're interested in, so they can take those 5-10 minutes that they might have and use them on what they're interested in, instead of again comparing that to a workshop where we have them for 2 hours. Online, they don't have as much of an attention span, so we need to keep our audience in mind, and this is a great way to do that. And then we have building blocks to bring engagement to that. And so that's really sort of, again, the engagement features. That's obviously sort of the interesting part in this, is what are the options in terms of collecting then feedback on the content and input. And so on Conveyor Docs, it's a simple click anywhere in the document, leave a comment. Admins have some additional features to ask questions and people can respond to those. And then the overlays that I mentioned is, again, additional content like maps, videos, etc. Conveyor Sites has additional features beyond that. So the PDFs can be part of that mix. And I mentioned earlier, this could be poster boards. So you can have maybe an agenda outlining what our workshop is about. Here's 4 poster boards. and you can kind of plug that PDF functionality into your landing page and reference that. But we also have surveys as a key component to that, so you can use any kind of survey functionality, including a very simple kind of mapping interface. That's part of the survey. And then this is a new feature for us. We have some discussions, so you can run some simple brainstormings and things like that as part of that landing page experience too. So the discussions were really sort of meant for things like goal reviews. So let's say you have certain objectives or goals that you want to present and discuss. So that's kind of geared towards that. So it's very much sort of a building block kind of structure and approach. And yeah, with that, I want to just go into a couple of examples if that works.
That'd be great.
So the first, yeah, we're going to look at one example at each of those categories. Sorry, go ahead.
That's perfect. I'm writing down a couple of questions for you, which I'll ask maybe on each one. I'll ask a question or two.
Sounds great. So the first one is a draft review kind of example. So again, Konveio provides you with either a landing page or a document page that you can send people to. As I mentioned, you can kind of introduce the document, and then the document is sort of a long scroll kind of PDF reader in a sense. All you have to do is upload your PDF. It automatically kind of displays the way that you outline and lay out your content. And then, as you can tell, we have a couple of options to add information and content on top of this. I'll come back to this in other examples. This is just an example of an embedded survey in this. You can use these types of functionality to jump to different parts and explore different areas. There's additional tools we're going to see in the next example. But really at the heart of it are these little comments. So as soon as you publish this and make this available, people can click and explore other people's comments, or they can simply write a comment themselves. So as we kind of scroll through this, we can kind of explore what people are saying. As you can tell, people can respond to each other's comments. So it's a really sort of a dialogue-driven tool if you choose to make it so. People can label their own questions. I actually want to bring up a different example that I should have loaded beforehand, but to just sort of highlight the engagement part of this better. I'm already logged in because I want to show the reporting later, but just to kind of give you an idea of the functionality here, you can click anywhere in the document. It just opens a simple comment form. You can choose, different comment types. So participants can help you label comments and classify them, which makes the reporting ultimately a lot easier. We have some of those that are reserved for admins, so you can add official responses to that, for example, and close the feedback loop. You can add highlighted comments, which is another tool for admins to just add guiding questions throughout that if you don't want just the open-ended kind of conversation on top of this. As I mentioned, this is a good example of adding and looking at some of those additional content items. So this could be videos, which obviously sort of is a great way to introduce certain topic areas. One thing that we frequently see being used in sort of policy documents is background information. If you have something that is very technical, this is a great, and you can't change the document because it's a legal document, this is a great way to provide additional background information, explanations, things like that. And then, as I mentioned, to make this really sort of engaging, we've seen clients get pretty creative with sort of in terms of what they're putting in. So this could be, for example, a Google Street View to provide overviews of, existing conditions. It could be 3D models even. So it can get, pretty immersive and kind of engaging. And then just to highlight that too, there's additional sort of navigation options. So you can give people a guided tour and stop on different, here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2. We have, if your PDF has bookmarks defined, it'll create a drop-down that automatically shows all the different things you can navigate to. So a ton of additional sort of functionality, just make that PDF easier to navigate and understand. So that's in a nutshell.
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yes,
so is that what the bookmarks, is that what you meant about building blocks and the bookmarks and the guided tour? Is that how you might guide somebody to find their way in the document?
Yes, that is sort of in Conveyor Docs. Those are the navigation features we provide. I'm going to come back to that. Actually, it's a great segue into our next example here. So the idea then to use this to publish interactive documents. This is a integrated IDO or a zoning code in the city that we are hosting for the city of Albuquerque. They came to us, we helped them through the engagement or through the review of that as they were drafting it, but their challenge was to provide ways to navigate this and to get answers really for citizens that are not very savvy in the planning space or understand some of those concepts. And they have a hard time finding answers in a 600-page document where the answers are spread out throughout that. And so we came to this, and this is kind of where Conveyor Sites comes in. We help them create different landing pages to make the document easier to understand. So on the home page, our landing pages are very visual, kind of section by section, the parallax pages in a sense, but they're really visual, kind of image rich and graphic rich kind of sections. So you can either, we work with them and their planning department through what the most important questions are and audiences that we're serving. And so they decided that initially they wanted to give people just access to the full document if you want to just jump in on page 1. And then we decided to provide some quick links for the people that know how to navigate this, so the developers in town and other people, and they can just jump directly to learning about overlay zones or the use table or things like that. So this is sort of catching the expert audience. And then later on, we help create or help them create step-by-step guides, so that then guides users based on their key questions to find those answers. And so we'll come back to that just to kind of show you, when you just click on read document, it just jumps directly into the PDF. You can start exploring that pretty immediately. If you compare this to a 5-minute download, if you just download the whole PDF, this kind of loads immediately. You can kind of look at it, start exploring it. As you can tell, they have, they made use of our overlay kind of functionality, so you can link to different sections. You can kind of highlight, different kind of background information. They had an introduction video that you can kind of watch that guides people through this. They also, and that's kind of mentioned what I mentioned earlier, they brought the zoning map directly to the zoning document. So you have those things side by side. And there's ways to kind of deeply integrate those maps. So you can, for example, click on a specific land use and then see a map that just shows those land uses and things like that. So there are some interesting integrations possible that make that easier to understand. And then obviously, this is kind of what I mentioned earlier, you can look at the table of contents, and that, as you upload additional sort of iterations of this, that obviously uploads and updates automatically, and you can kind of jump to specific parts of that very quickly. Coming back to that, though, as I mentioned, the guidance and sort of higher level summaries is something that we find very important, especially in longer and denser documents. So the simple questions like, what can I build on my property, instead of having to really understand the 600-page document, they created something where you can simply search for your property, and then you get answers based on those on that input. So you could kind of look at the zoning map specifically filtered for your property, finding out what that is, what you need to look at. Based on those inputs, you can then, search for and get those specific answers. And then again, all of those directly then jump back into the document at a specific page where you find the answers. So again, basically making it much easier to find your way around and find answers in a document that is otherwise, somewhat tedious and fairly technical to navigate. Before moving on to digital workshops, just circling back real quick, the draft review example I showed you was sort of purely based on Conveyor Docs. As you can tell, the landing pages were what we used in our interactive document, so it extended that PDF functionality with those additional landing pages. And going forward, the next two examples I'm showing are also based on Conveyor sites. So looking at digital workshops, as I mentioned, this is obviously sort of a big need at the moment, as we, especially in our part of the world, can't meet in person anymore. So we're all learning how to deal with that and how to use different approaches to replicate things online that we've been used to doing face-to-face. Our Conveyor really sort of does not replace a face-to-face tool like Zoom or GoToWebinar or any of those kind of meeting tools. It's really more an integrated part of that experience, or an extension, or ultimately a replacement. And so what I mean by this is an example here in Denver that happened actually before COVID-19. They hosted an open house in a neighborhood. People came to the workshop. They were listening to a 15-minute introduction that they live streamed and video captured for the website. People after the 15 minutes, or participants, could walk around the room, explore some poster boards, talk to some experts in the room, and provide feedback on those poster boards. And because not everybody could make it to that one workshop that they held, they decided to replicate those online. And so right as the workshops concluded, they launched the engagement on this website. So it's really an extension of the process. You could still go in and kind of listen to the same introduction. And then just like people were using the poster board stations around the room, you could choose based on your interest which poster boards you want to explore. So let's say we were interested in the economy parts of the workshop. You could then go in online and explore those same poster boards. You could go in, kind of zoom into those poster boards, explore those. People were using sticky notes in the meeting to provide qualitative or feedback. They used our commenting feature here on these poster boards online. And the benefit here too was there was a back and forth kind of conversation on some of those. And so it matched pretty evenly sort of the experience in the workshop. Only that we found online the qualitative or feedback was actually much deeper and typically more thought out than in the workshop on small sticky notes. The other part that really was neat was they posted images of the workshop feedback that they received. So they had a dot voting exercise in the workshop. So this kind of closed the feedback loop and kind of highlighted that those results were captured. And then on top of that, they used Conveyo's survey functionality to plug in those same identical kind of questions for dot voting. So this is based on a survey tool that Conveyo provides. You can use this to pick your top 3 choices. You submit this, and then ultimately at the end of the day, the organizers of this event had information that was tightly integrated, so that the spreadsheets could just be merged. There was no difference ultimately in the choices that people made online or in person. And so what we see now, you can always go back to this landing page. That's sort of the landing page in this case is really more of an agenda or meeting space if you want. And you could continue the journey, but as I said, not everybody has extensive amounts of time, if they are in a meeting where we have them for 2 hours. So they may just go into economy and land use because that's what they're interested in, and then end their journey there.
It's a bit like a digital world cafe. You can go to the topic that interests you most, and maybe 2 or 3 in the half an hour that you've got to engage. But I love that you can do this from home and also see what other people maybe are doing face to face. So, it's there's a nice, elegant integration of online and offline here.
And you really, it's that extension that oftentimes you end up going home from a workshop and you then have that idea that you really wanted to kind of say in the workshops. You still have that opportunity to do that afterwards and tell your neighbors about it, obviously, and things like that. So now, what we see is there's interesting ways to combine this. So, a Zoom workshop obviously has some accessibility issues in terms of not everybody being able to install software. So we've seen clients use this to live stream their workshop, and people can follow along on the website and then get engaged. So that's an option. Another option here is to really sort of fully abandon the idea of meeting at a certain time, because honestly, for certain things, we don't need to meet in person. We can kind of give people the full experience at their own time. And so this is an example of a virtual pop-up. They posted just an introduction video. Here's where we are. Here's what we're expecting you to do. here's a sign-up sheet, sort of like in an in-person meeting. And then they had a couple of online activities, reviewing some goals and principles, an online dating experience, design sprints. It's kind of a couple of creative ways to kind of get involved, or just a simple kind of feedback comment card to catch everybody who might not want to go into that much depth. So just I think that the mix of the two probably gives you an idea both how flexibly you can structure those digital workshops to your needs. They don't follow sort of a given format, because every community and every consulting firm might have a different approach and might have different content to share. So it kind of can be easily rearranged and adjusted towards that. And it integrates those different kind of feedback elements. Nice. The last thing I want to kind of highlight are the committee workspaces. And as I said, this is sort of a fairly new addition for us. It was sparked by the requests we got, and even in our own experience, sort of this having to, in the facilitating these sort of smaller, looser stakeholder groups. So this is not a team feature, like this is not replacing, Google Docs, collaborative drafting, or anything like that. I think those are really team features that Konveio was not designed to address. This is really sort of a middle ground, again, sort of the internal, external stakeholders that we engage before we publish the, public review draft. It might be, again, a business community, a steering committee, whatever that might be, people that usually have other jobs, that have other interests. They don't want to learn sort of a new tool. So we try to make this as easy as possible. And it really is, again, based on those landing pages. You can just give them sort of an online hub to show them and share all the information that they need access to with one specific URL and one shared password token. So it's really not a user-specific password. It's more of a token that is shared. You can just email that out to your group. They can plug that in. They get access to the information you share with them. That could be, here's our list of upcoming meetings and a quick link to open those in a Zoom call. This might be, here's our past meeting minutes. Please acknowledge those and send us your feedback. Did we miss anything? Here's a discussion draft we would like you to look at before our next meeting. Let's collaborate on this at our own time. And then just use the meeting to talk about the pieces of it where we might disagree that need sort of a resolution or sort of additional conversation. So it makes meetings more effective in that sense. It moves things along. It really fills the gaps between actual in-person meetings. And again, can contain all kinds of other information. So yeah, with that, that concludes sort of the 360 through our different use cases, and then kind of highlighted how ultimately the different features kind of fit together, and how they're really sort of building blocks designed to collect feedback on content. Ultimately, that's what we sort of interpret as content engagement. I know it's not a term that is sort of frequently used in this space. But to us, that's kind of the idea. How can we provide a toolkit that makes that really easy and flexible?
Yeah, well, I mean, you are talking about a lot of different types of content there with the maps, the videos, the Google Map zoom in, the poster boards are quite different to documents. I can totally see why you call it content-based, and I think that's a good reference. It really seems like something that would be very useful to people in planning in particular. Like, I love the zoning element of type in your address and zoom in, because that's, as a participant in an engagement process, when you run these things, they often walk straight up to the map and say, where am I in this? And there's the other project, and how's this going to impact me? So I think getting over that hurdle, I think, would be really useful for participation, but it's also an incredibly useful suite of ways that planners can be able to present their content as well, because they often have a diverse amount. I can also see a really interesting use case for industry, like a Department of Industry working really closely with an industry group developing guidelines, for example, or an industry association working to develop guidelines. And then, of course, as you said, stakeholder engagement. For me, it seems really obvious that you might engage with a working group to develop a draft document, which you then might put out for public consultation. So I think there's a lot of potential in that area too, Chris. And yeah, digital events. I like the idea of digital events. I mean, we really need that right now. So that poster board, that particularly, I love the idea of having a concierge welcome, you've made it to the event, how can we help you, and show us around to different bits of information. I think that's really nice addition to both the documents but also the digital events, and having those open, like an open house available to people for a whole week is amazing, because one of the biggest challenges in engagement is how do we reach people when they're available to engage. So I think you're really addressing a lot of the big issues for engagement, which is reaching people where they are, at times that suit them, when they have capacity to engage, and then also giving them the information that they're looking for right away. So great demo, thank you. I have a question about, as a user, as a stakeholder engagement professional, if I was to purchase this product, at one point you mentioned uploading the PDF. Is this something that I would do? So I've, often with our project teams and our communication teams, we put together a bunch of documents. It might be the poster boards, it might be the document for consultation, it might be a draft for stakeholder engagement. Do I manage the process of uploading the document?
Yes, absolutely. Konveio was really designed as a tool that is self-serve. So, I want to say 90% of our clients, buy a license, get their site, and then are up and running and maintain their own site. So, when you look at this, just going to highlight this real quick. We have a very simple kind of admin dashboard that gives you access to all different types of content you can create. So you can simply click on add a new document, type in a few fields, a title, short introduction that shows up on top. You can upload the PDF. You can decide, what the engagement looks like when a comment period opens and when it ends. You can add things like the step-by-step guides and things like that. And, you click save and that's it. So, first time around that might take, a little bit longer, but we've heard clients that, put a new draft up in 5 minutes and are ready to go. So it can be very quick. And obviously you can spend more time if you add additional content into it, the overlays and maps and things like that. Those things take some time to set up, but it's really more the drafting of it than anything. So those things are really easy to kind of, again, create and maintain. And so the same goes for, these overview or landing pages. We do offer some of those pre-templated. So you just click on a link and it automatically, spins those up and has, some placeholders in there you can replace. And then, as I said, it's really sort of a flexible building kit that you can, mix and match and add additional kind of elements to.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Chris. So I guess another question that would be probably on top of people's minds as a user would be something around accessibility. We often get asked, like, how does this meet government accessibility requirements? What's your answer to that question?
It's a good one. And it's especially a tricky one, obviously, because we're using PDFs. But I want to say, Konveio is fully WCAG 2.0 AA compliant. So we're meeting all those points. It took a little bit to get there because, PDFs can be, a pain to work with at times, I want to say. But that to mention is any PDF that you have that meets those standards. So the PDF itself needs to, PDF, that Adobe Acrobat provides tools to check whether your PDF meets those. So images in the PDF need to have alt tags, contrast, color contrast standards and things like that in the PDF need to meet those guidelines. But as long as the PDF does, if you upload it or when you upload it to Konveio, it stays fully compliant. And then all the additional things that we add on top of it are fully compliant too.
Fantastic. That's great. And I guess the other big questions that you have to cover off on before you go to your CTO or your executive or your CIO is about data storage and security of the product. How do you normally, respond to questions from government agencies around that? In Australia, we have a requirement for data to be stored in Australia, and same with New Zealand. What do you guys do? Because I know you're coming around.
That's a good question. I want to say we meet, without going into too much detail, we meet all the security standards, from encryption to, exchange of data, et cetera. So we have that, and we can sort of provide more documentation on that, obviously. And then we do offer hosting in a variety of different countries. So we have servers in the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, et cetera. So though that means all this data is stored locally, and those things, those concerns are addressed that way.
Awesome. And I understand you're already working with a couple of Australian organisations. Are you also working in
Yeah.
New Zealand? What are some of those? Are they local government, state government?
I think I want to say mostly local governments at this point. So Mary Burnong, Northern Beaches, there's a couple of communities that we're supporting. And yeah, that's why, as I said, we have those servers and things in place and can get those sites spun up pretty quickly.
Fantastic. What about, we were going to talk about reports. Like that's obviously a really important part of engagement is where does the data go? How are we going to use it? How do we pull it out of the product if we need to? And we've got other engagement data we need to correlate it with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm already logged in here as an admin on this site. And as you can tell, when I'm logged in, I have, the different kind of edit options. And so the first place I want to look at is the comments tab. So any comment that come in on a PDF automatically show up in here. So you can kind of explore those, look at them in more detail. You see the sort of nested, threaded kind of conversations. You have a range of different kind of filters. Again, the types are, what the public helps assign. So, you can change those and make them really what you like. So you can kind of just say, show me all the comments that are suggestions and then kind of just look at those. You can also then, with your team, use this interface to for some very simple sort of qualitative analysis. So we have a tagging system in place that allows you to define your own tags. It looks up whatever is already in here, or you can create some new ones that way. And assign those and kind of, again, create an additional way to filter and kind of make sense of this all. You can also use this to unpublish comments. So if something might be inappropriate, et cetera, you can use this to, take them offline, still keep a record of them. And then at the end of the day, obviously, as you mentioned, you want to get the information out. So our report tab has some additional sort of at a glance ways to kind of get a sense of what's coming in. So you can see, comments by type, how many comments did we get about suggestions or, answers or typos. So, we did a really good job proofreading this. And then, we look at the comments by tag. And so this is, again, what the, team that has been working to analyze this came up with. So lots of pedestrian-related and transportation-related kind of comments. And we do have a simple sort of sentiment analysis built in. So this is drawing from, Google's natural language processing API and gives you a good sense sort of at a glance how things break down and, what comments you're getting.
Nice.
And then, the two export formats we have is basically you can either package everything into a PDF. So it bundles the same PDF that you uploaded with those comments in them. So you get all the locations, which I guess is really the heart of it. So you see where the comments were made, those locations, and then know what comments were said about each of those locations. And the same goes for the spreadsheet format, so you can pull in a CSV, and they again have those reference numbers, so you can always look back and say, what this comment was about, page 7 and location, 3 on page 7, and you can look exactly sort of what it was about. And then, here too, you can kind of filter this and just say, export all the PDF with all the suggestions that were made for bicycling or something like that. So you can pull specific reports based on those numbers.
Fantastic.
Numbers.
Oh, that's great. So if anybody knows the Engage Tech Spectrum, it sounds to me, Chris, and I might validate this with you, but it sounds to me like you guys provide a tool for a range of different consultation methods, including presentation of information. So that's kind of in the promote, educate, provide info part of the Engage Tech Spectrum on the, thank you. That'd be great to bring it up. On the left side, there we go. Educate, distribute information. Oh, look at those. You've already thought this one through. Thank you. Consult, collect info and submissions onto the document. And this is obviously, actually, it's almost ideally like what the icon does in there, which is encourages people to read and then comment on the document.
Right.
And then the stakeholder engagement functions, I think you're moving right up into that collaborate area, aren't you? Where you could be, as I said, developing industry guidelines with industry that they then potentially deliver for their industry. But the other thing I just want to highlight, because you have showed us the reporting, is that I think you're doing like quite a good job, credit where it's due, of doing some of that information and issues management as well. It looks like it would be, this is quite, a lot of tools that are out there are really great at presenting interesting ways to engage. but to get people to engage with a document and content, which is really kind of what we're trying to do throughout all our engagements, and then to allow you to analyze the submissions and feedback that you're getting in real time to track issues. I think you're doing a great job of that. So I just wanted to recognize that you've got that in your product as well. And it sounds to me like, having looked at that a lot of the exporting of the information that's collected through engagement would really be done for the project teams, who are then trying to take on board those comments rather than just to do a synthesis of the feedback, which you're able to do quite well in your product.
Yeah, I think you summarized that perfectly. I don't think I have anything to add to that. It's interesting that you mentioned the industry groups. We did have some, design or fashion groups that came together, including H&M and others, that, created standards for tracking clothing from the yarn to when it was recycled. And so, there's a couple of groups like that have sort of really used that at that collaboration stage, whether that's on the private side or on the government side. So I think in those uses, we stretch all the way to that collaborate level. Well, in others, oftentimes it might just be on the inform, to the involve kind of side. So it really depends on the use case, I guess.
So Chris, a lot of people in Australia and New Zealand already have like an engagement headquarters or a have your say page. How would we use this tool in that context? Would we embed it in the website, embed it in something like a Bang the Table, or is this something that we would set up separate to it?
Yeah, good question. Both of those are an option. I think it goes back to our to this overview. So Conveyor Docs itself can be embedded. You see a little embed link on the top of this page, and it basically gives you an embed script that works very similar to a YouTube embed, and you can just plug that into your city's website or into your engagement website. And as such should be an easy integration. We've seen it integrated into a range of different kind of tools. The Conveyor sites level with the landing pages really doesn't integrate too well, just because it stretches all the way across, and there's sort of some some considerations with how it displays on mobile devices and other screen sizes. And so in those cases, you would typically just sort of link to your Conveyor site. So you just create a button or a graphic and link that through, and people can come here. I think that also sort of gets into the weeds of whether you have to log in and register a user account, or whether you can participate without registering. We offer both those options. However, the registration and logged in usage typically works best when not embedded, just because otherwise there's some usability issues of jumping back and forth between different websites when you verify your email. So that said, long story short, it can be embedded, it can be linked to, and then as you mentioned, with Bang the Table with Engagement HQ, we do have a little bit of a tighter integration and have a roadmap to build that integration to more deeply integrate the commenting with their user base. So there's a start to that at this point, and we're kind of continually improving that over the coming months. And that's where we currently are, and an option that's available, knowing that a lot of the clients, especially in Australia, I think are Bang the Table customers.
That's great. Look, it's really obvious that you've created a very comprehensive product and that you're really flexible about how different people might use it, Chris. So, thanks. It's good to understand that as a user. But also, I think I'm really excited to see how different people in Australia use this product. I do think that we're going to see some interesting creative ways of engaging both stakeholders and the public. So yeah, thanks for spending the time with me today, showing us through the tool. I hope everyone enjoyed that. If you want to get in touch with Chris, what's the best way to reach you? And maybe you can pull up your website so that we can all see that homepage.
Yeah, I should have had a nice slide up, but really the best way is to go to Konveio, which is either convey.io or conveyor.com, both work. And there's a contact tab that gives you quick access to either call us and ask for Chris, or send us a quick note. That'll end up mostly in my inbox. So yeah, looking forward to talking to everyone. And as you said, it's fascinating to us too to kind of see how people start using and making use of it, because there's different combinations that you sometimes don't think of yourself. So that's the really fun part is kind of seeing, how that ultimately supports, engagement across a range of different uses and needs.
Thanks for opening up our industry to all these possibilities. It's great to meet you. Have a wonderful day. Thanks everyone for listening. My name's Amelia Loye. I'm from engage2.com.au. Please get in touch if you want to talk about engagement and technology for it.